just further indicates that there is some element of the hiring process that is broken. Hello everyone, I'm Seth and this is Acquired Salary. In today's video, I'm going to react to the infographic show's video on why companies are firing Gen Z. Before we get into it, if you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. I would greatly appreciate if you drop a like on the video. My goal is to get to 50 likes on today's video. With that, let's jump into things.
It's 9:17 and Brad is not just late for the 9 o'clock meeting, he's late for work. Brad's dress code screams anything but business. He's strutting into the office in a Supreme t-shirt and ripped jeans. And just when it couldn't get any worse, his sneakers are muddy from last weekend's hiking trip. In the meeting, Brad's long-winded explanations drag on and on, forcing everyone to cut him off before the room falls asleep. His technical skills are non-existent. He's got a master's degree, but when it comes to Excel, he's more lost than ever. He can swipe through TikTok, but can't find a reply all in Outlook. Faced with real problems, Brad fumbles. Without a YouTube tutorial, his only problem-solving experience is pressing X to reload in video games. But the real kicker? Brad is so casual, it hurts. He strolls through the office like it's a coffee shop, high-fiving coworkers and calling the boss dude. Brad is the average Gen Z graduate, and like many Gen Z graduates, Brad will be out of the job within the first few months. In today's episode of the Infographic Show, we'll reveal the shocking reasons why companies are firing Gen Z workers.
Well, from that standpoint, if we just look at the intro, the main things that they're hitting on is Gen Z's lack of professionalism, improper attire, showing up late, and not speaking in a professional manner. However, the claim that Gen Z doesn't have the right technical skills is, again, the same claim that all these companies are always making, that Gen Z is unprepared for the workforce, even though they're going to college and getting degrees, even master's degrees. However, that's not necessarily the case. Obviously, it's an overgeneralization to say all of Gen Z is acting like this, yet the stigma still exists. So let's see what else they've got to say.
Supervisors are facing a hiring crisis when it comes to recent graduates, and the news is bad for Gen Z. More and more bosses are refusing to hire a new generation of workers. The situation has gotten so bad that even colleges have gotten in on trying to solve the crisis.
Colleges should be trying to solve the crisis. That's kind of their imperative of, we're providing you an education so that you can work in a professional manner and earn a higher wage. So the fact that it's only just now that colleges are starting to take responsibility and try and fix this problem, it's kind of unsettling that colleges lost the plot in the first place.
With many schools now offering additional courses to specifically prepare students for a professional setting. A recent survey of almost 1,000 business leaders at the forefront of the business, technology, and science sectors revealed that 1 in 6 companies are now hesitant to hire a recent college graduate. The survey asked specific questions about hiring practices, demographics, and reasons for satisfactory or unsatisfactory outcome. While 94% of companies reported hiring recent college graduates, only 25% said those hires were a success. The rest were either unsatisfactory or a total disaster. 3/4 of companies stated that they were outright dissatisfied with their Gen Z hires. But
again, from that standpoint, if you're unsatisfied with the hires that you're making, as a company, you can take responsibility for improving your hiring processes. Yet, with Gen Z making up 30 to 40% of the upcoming workforce, it's also the company's responsibility to fix the issue in terms of, okay, we're hiring Gen Z, they're not prepared for the workforce. The way that a company can solve that problem is by implementing good training programs to help Gen Z understand how to act in a professional workplace and the key fundamental technical skills that are required for a role, especially when it comes to entry-level jobs, which is what Gen Z is going to primarily be working in at this point in time. Yeah, it should still be something that the companies are doing, not just expecting Gen Z to be perfect out the gate.
But it gets worse. 3/5 of companies reported firing their Gen Z hire within a year. This has left a bad taste in the mouth of the business leaders across industries. The biggest complaint was that college graduates are unprofessional and poorly prepared to work, with many being overwhelmed by challenges in the workplace. Has Gen Z been coddled to the point they are no longer hireable? According to the Society for Human Resource Management, the average hiring success rate is right around 43%.
So if the average hiring success rate is 43%, that is indicative of pretty much 60% whatever it is, 57% of all other hiring processes being insufficient at properly evaluating how successful a candidate will be in a role, which just further indicates that there is some element of the hiring process that is broken.
That means that 43 people out of every 100 hired will actually work out long-term for the company. But when you look at the intelligence survey, the situation for Gen Z is even more worrying. 6 out of 10 companies surveyed reported having to fire a Gen Z worker, putting Gen Z hiring success rate significantly lower than the average. Houston?
Well, 6 out of 10 companies having to fire Gen Z workers is in alignment with the data that they just claimed. So is this necessarily a Gen Z problem if only 43% of all candidates work out? 6 out of 10, that's close to that 60% or the 57% of hires that don't work out. It's not necessarily a Gen Z problem, it's more so a hiring process problem.
We have a generational problem, and it's bad enough that many Gen Z workers might have trouble landing and keeping jobs because of it. So let's get into the issues behind Gen Z's apparent lack.
The only reason that Gen Z is going to have troubles finding jobs and keeping jobs, well, when it comes to finding jobs, it's Gen Z's having to deal with the stigma that they're unemployable because they're unprofessional and unprepared for the workforce. That's not something that Gen Z can necessarily change during the hiring process. Obviously, as an individual candidate, you can demonstrate your skills and abilities and how you act in a professional manner, but generationally speaking, if the stigma is there, the only way to give Gen Z the chance that they deserve is having the stigma change.
Lack of hireability. A whopping 9 out of 10 companies surveyed reported that Gen Z desperately needed further etiquette training. Across the board, the prognosis is clear. Gen Z does not know how to operate in a professional environment. Good workplace etiquette is key for productivity and harmony. It's about understanding how to navigate professional relationships. This includes knowing when to use formal titles, being aware of sexual harassment policies, and proper communication, both on the...
Every single company has some sort of HR training around sexual harassment. So again, that's an example of companies taking ownership of, hey, we understand that this could become a really big problem for us as a company, so we're going to implement some training program to ensure that it's not as big of a problem because we've trained our employees how to act.
On the phone and online. Gen Z tends to treat its workplace and correspondence like it's a Discord chat room. Memes and emojis are great for Reddit and Instagram, but not so much for your 9-to-5. Imagine losing your job because you responded to an email with a handsome Squidward gif. Knowing how to dress is just as important. Most workplaces go for business casual, a more relaxed version of a more formal attire you might see at a law firm. Business casual can be dressed down to jeans, but only if paired with a nice button-up shirt and nice clean shoes. Wearing graphic t-shirts and dirty sneakers is definitely a no-go. If you're part of Gen Z, you should treat the workplace like you're dressing for a date. You want to...
Again, from that standpoint, the major tech companies have had that policy where they can dress casual and they can have graphic tees, and it doesn't necessarily matter so much because the tech workers are still doing the job that they've been paid to do. Unless you're a client in a client-facing role, what is what problem? The question that I ask is, what problem is it solving by dressing in a professional manner? I still think it's important to dress at least business casual or in a professional manner. However, if a company really wants to think about it, what problem is it really solving, especially if it's not a customer-facing role? And it's hard to say that it's going to impact the quality of the work that they're outputting.
Make a good impression without being creepy by wearing a full suit. A lack of professionalism was a reason that Gen Zers didn't work out 46% of the time. Other issues included a serious lack of motivation or initiative, with half of all companies surveyed, almost 500, stating that their Gen Z employees needed close supervision. And
from that standpoint, if we're just looking at it in terms of the educational system as a whole, I haven't gone super in-depth or in detail about it, but essentially with the way that middle school, high school, and college is all set up is they're given guidance on, okay, this is what you have to do and this is how you have to do it. Even in college, yes, there's a lot more freedom in college in comparison to high school. However, it's not necessarily giving the younger generation the tools or the scaffolding to build up that initiative. So it's not that surprising that Gen Z is not taking the initiative and is being more dependent and passive in their work. Also, if you take into consideration this is something that I talk about all the time, from the mid-60s, early 70s, the productivity of workers has gone up, yet the salaries of the roles with which those workers are working in has not kept up pace with the increase in productivity. So obviously, from that standpoint, yeah, the corporate buzzword is whatever it is, quiet quitting. Quiet quitting is, by definition, on Urban Dictionary, or just the way that I understand it, is it's not that they're going above and beyond, but they're not neglecting their duties. So is it really that big of a deal if they're doing what they're paid to do and nothing more? Well, if you want them to do more, then you have to incentivize them to want to do more.
Showed little drive to take charge. This might be due to the culture shock Gen Z is experiencing moving from a perpetually online life to a professional workplace. It can also be that Gen Z is the most vocal about how exploitative industries can be. While their online existence may have dulled Gen Z's preparation for a professional setting, it's also increased their awareness of the many pitfalls of modern industry. Gen Z questions things like why cover letters are still a thing, why salary information isn't displayed on a job listing and not kept secret, and wages.
Again, from modern society, we're starting to see salary transparency be a thing. You know, a lot of states are passing laws that require it to be transparent so that people aren't getting taken advantage of. Additionally, cover letters, in my experience, nobody actually reads cover letters. So what's the value in a cover letter? Well, if you are applying to a job and the hiring manager is actually a part of the old guard and cares about cover letters, obviously if you don't include a cover letter, then you're going to be thrown out. But again, Gen Z is probably not going to be so concerned about not working for somebody that is applying those antiquated policies when they're providing a resume which is going to demonstrate all of their skills and abilities. What is the additional cover letter, which is in general going to be templated anyways, going to do?
Overall have not kept pace with either cost of living or the value of industry since the 1970s. Hiring managers may find Gen Z more motivated if the American dream wasn't officially unreachable for most of them because boomers sucked it dry decades ago and left a mess in their wake. But there's still some very legitimate criticism to be made of Gen Z. 39% of surveyed companies stated that Gen Z employees lacked good communication skills, which is ironic for a generation that spends hours screaming into headsets on Call of Duty. When most online lobbies devolve into a shouting blame game with a healthy sprinkling of racism and homophobia, it's easy to see why Gen Z communication skills might be glitching. This ties in.
If Gen Z is lacking communication skills, again, this is something that the educational system, or just it's on the educational system in terms of not helping to teach and train critical thinking and how to identify what's important to communicate and what isn't. And that's where, again, to solve the problem, colleges obviously need to rework and prioritize the professionalism and the communication skills to prepare Gen Z for the workforce. However, companies also can implement their own individual trainings to help overcome these issues. It's a very solvable problem. The question is whether companies actually want to do it. And it's pretty clear that the companies don't really want to do it because that's additional work.
And with 38% of companies who reported that Gen Z was overly sensitive and struggled with professional feedback. The online world turned every disagreement into a zero-sum ego battle, and now Gen Z treats feedback like a boss just nerfed their favorite weapon. Even more troubling for Gen Z is the fact that 34% of new hires showed bad problem-solving skills, which is odd because video games are supposed to make you better at that. But
it depends on what video games you're playing, and obviously when it comes to problem-solving skills, it depends on what problem you're solving. And again, this is something that management can help do by helping to ask questions like, what problem are we trying to solve, and how is this proposed solution the best way to solve it? As an individual contributor, if you have a good manager that can help guide you and teach you, that's that's huge. So when considering accepting a new role, that's one of the things that I like to look at and identify is, okay, well, is this hiring manager going to be somebody that helps to develop me and my career and my skills? Or are they going to potentially stifle it and hold me back in certain ways?
Turns out real-world problems aren't like following a quest marker in Skyrim, especially when you can't communicate properly. A staggering 30% of employers say Gen Z lacks basic technical skills, struggling with Excel and Word. Programs.
That's really surprising to me, considering Gen Z has been working on computers. They've been taking tests on computers. They've been studying on computers. Their textbooks are on computers. The claim that they have bad technical skills is probably not necessarily true. It's perhaps they're just not as motivated. And really, when it comes to technical skills like using Excel or determining a certain function in Microsoft Word, you can really Google it. But again, that comes back to Gen Z not taking the initiative. Well, you can kind of understand the underlying of what can we do to incentivize Gen Z to work harder, perhaps pay them more, or include incentives where performance in a job is rewarded properly.
That are as old as their parents. This decline in ability is blamed on access to mobile devices and cloud-based editors like Google Docs, both of which means Gen Z doesn't know how to navigate menus of word processing programs or engage in even simple formatting tasks. Ironically, despite being the first digitally native generation, Gen Z is also showing a dramatic decline in typing skills, thanks to an over-reliance on mobile phones and autocorrect features where the spelling just needs to be in the ballpark. If you think we're making any of this up, Reddit is full of posts of Gen Z not knowing how to use various computer programs or even computers themselves, and the complaints range from around the world, not just making this an American or even Western issue. But it's not entirely Gen Z's fault. Colleges and high schools are increasingly failing to prepare students for the challenges of the modern workplace.
Again, this is what I say all the time. It's the root cause is the educational system failing to teach students what is actually important when it comes to obtaining a job.
Previous generations had mandatory typing and basic computer classes, giving them a solid foundation. But today, many schools have cut these programs, assuming Gen Z's familiarity with tech means that they don't need formal.
That's an asinine approach. Why would you cut a fundamental skill like typing out of your school just because you think they're familiar with it? Well, before you make that decision, you should probably do some proficiency testing in the first place to confirm, oh, this is actually something that we don't need to be focused on in teaching. Obviously, that wasn't done, and the elimination of these programs has negatively impacted. So what you can do to solve the problem is, okay, do the competency testing on typing skills, implement whatever typing classes, and see how it improves. It's pretty simple, and it's kind of crazy to me that schools would consider removing typing programs or classes from the normal curriculum.
Instruction. While Gen Z might be digital natives, much of their knowledge is informal and self-taught, leaving them high and dry. Recently, California made it mandatory for public students to undergo typing classes, much like their parents had to in order to graduate. Gen Z is also suffering from a critical social skills problem, likely fueled by their online lifestyle, where direct human-to-human interaction is rarer than ever before.
Direct human-to-human interaction is definitely rarer than it has been due to COVID and lockdowns and having to finish their education through online programs and reducing that face-to-face time.
Growing into what is increasingly being called a dating crisis as Gen Z fails to make meaningful romantic connections. Online culture may allow you to play with people all over the world, but real-world interactions still matter. A survey by psychologist Andrew Thomas showed that the feeling of being left out amongst teens grew from 13% in 2018 to 30%.
Well, they could also be feeling left out in terms of not being given the same opportunities to enter the workforce and get a high-paying job, because there's this stigma against Gen Z saying that they're entirely incompetent and unprofessional and unable to work in a professional manner. So obviously, if they're having more difficulty finding jobs, then they're going to have more difficulty in facilitating dating and relationships, because, from that standpoint, it costs money to go on dates. Even if you're doing cheap dates and those sorts of things, it's not free all the time.
30% in 2022. Gen Z is outright avoiding in-person social interactions. A Center for Disease Control survey showed that teenagers are more risk-averse than ever before, with less rates of smoking, drug use, drinking, physical fighting, and even sex, showing a downward trajectory in all categories since 1990. That might sound like a good thing, but the bad side is that teenagers today are attending fewer in-person gatherings, such as house parties, than ever before.
Yeah, and this is definitely going to be contributing to the population collapse that we're seeing in the West. We're far below replacement rate, which means eventually, if you adjust out immigration, yeah, the population is going to collapse.
Whopping 59% of Gen Z males report not having approached a potential partner in person for the last year when the survey was taken.
Again, this is something that can come from societal pressures and social norms. It's all over TikTok, especially if you look at gym TikToks. There's girls that record guys just doing their normal workout and then trying to roast these guys for, oh, they're being such a creep, when they haven't even looked at them at all. Joey Swoll is a great example. He highlights them all the time. Obviously, when you have all these social pressures and potential to be highlighted as a weirdo or a creep, yeah, a guy is going to be more reluctant to actually approach women.
Trend is clear. Gen Z is less social than ever, despite spending most of their lives on social media. And this is making them worse at everything that a professional workplace requires out of them. Despite playing more video games than ever before, something that's proven to improve problem-solving skills and critical thinking skills, Gen Z is actually struggling with these skills in a real-life setting. Skill sets suited for video games are proving to be a poor fit for most professional jobs, though there are industries where Gen Z thrives, reflecting their unique upbringing. The question on every hiring manager's mind is, what do we do now? As the world becomes ever more digital, the hiring crisis is only set to grow. While typing and computer familiarization classes in schools is a great start, it doesn't solve the fundamental problem with Gen Z's lack of social skills, problem-solving abilities, and low personal initiative.
If you're a hiring manager and you're asking, what do you do now? The answer is pretty simple. You're going to have the older generations retiring, so you need to figure out how to enable the younger generations to actually be competent and work in a professional manner. So that's implementing training programs and mentoring the younger generations. Again, this is something that we've seen, I recall in high school, every sophomore, junior, senior year, every single year that you advance in high school, you'd always look down to the freshmen and be like, wow, this freshman class is so immature. And it's not necessarily the case, and this is something that we see with millennials, and every older generation looks to the younger generation, thinks they're so immature, or whatever the case may be. Again, it's because you're comparing apples to oranges. Obviously, if you're older, you're going to have more time to grow and develop as a person and be more mature. So, yes, the younger generation is going to be less mature than the older generation. They're not going to value and understand the importance of professionalism as much as the older generations, because I'm sure that the older generations had an adjustment period after college. It might not have been as severe because colleges had actually trained and served a better function back in the day, but it still doesn't change the fact that this is just something that is going to be a perpetual problem. So if you're a hiring manager, you have to solve that problem by stepping into the leadership role and helping to mentor and guide these people in the right direction.
The future of industry is extremely uncertain, and this should worry everyone. Now go check out Millennials vs.
Yeah, so overall, I'm in the boat that Gen Z is not as bad as media is making it out to be, and the studies are making it out to be. Obviously, it's important that we adjust the stigma that Gen Z is receiving, and might not be able to, as an individual, adjust the stigma as a whole, but you can become the outlier and change the individual thought, as long as you're working with a hiring manager or a team that is willing to give you an actual chance. So what do you think? Please share your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. And if you made it this far into the video, you may as well subscribe to the channel. Chances are you aren't subscribed, since 95% of you watching aren't. And if you do that, you won't miss out on future videos just like this one. Until next time, thank you.